Yeah. I'm really new to this.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
And you are Amanda with me. Where are you looking at?
The refinery and lighting.
What was that?
What facility?
Up in Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
All right. So you can start. My name is Ruth Benning, and I work with Sage ATC, formerly known and now is Atlas. So what is your experience with BWON so far? How comfortable you feel with it?
I've had it for a couple of years, but I've never, I don't know, it's kind of learn as I go. So
Okay.
I get a little.
What about you, Amanda?
I inherited the program 8 years ago, 8 months ago, but feel fairly comfortable, I guess, with it. Just we're implementing my new degree and everything like that, so I've had to get up to speed extremely.
Huh? I start. How are you? I'll put you in a bit. Okay, so you had it for a while. I know we did a lot of work in BWON at some point, and you're fairly new with it. Okay, all right. Well, this is the fundamental class, so it'll be good for you guys to understand the entirety of the program. Can I get you to sign in also, please?
Yeah,
Are you guys from the same refinery?
same company.
Same
different
company.
Locations.
Okay, excellent. All right. Well, what we're going to learn today is how to implement a BWON program as if you got it from scratch. And maybe this is a good thing so you understand all the basic functions of it and then how you build it up. We will talk about BWON program management and preparing for an external audit if you ever get one. And Mark, where are you located at?
Wichita.
Excellent. Okay, well, BWON is a difficult program because it's an air rule, but it's regulated on water. So it is concerned about benzene emissions, but deals with the water portion of the streams. So the steps to implement the BWON program is first assess your facility status. Basically, that means calculate your TAB. Everybody's familiar with what the TAB is? Okay. Then we're going to go through all these steps through the presentation and figure out how to do each one of them. Once you calculate your TAB, you're going to basically see where do you fall out. And there's different tiers. You can either have no controls or then you have to have controls and implement the compliance option. Then if you do have to implement the compliance option, you have to implement controls. And then it's the part where you do the BWON program management, where you create the tools for tracking compliance, define roles and responsibilities for your team, manage inspection and monitoring requirements, comply with reporting requirements, track and control waste, document control. And the last piece, if you want to have a good program, is to always audit it. So these are the steps that we're going to follow throughout the day. So any questions on this so far? Everybody is familiar with these terms? Okay. So the first piece that we will do is to calculate your TAB. So BWON affects refineries, chemical plants, TSDFs. Now, nobody here is a TSDF, so we're gonna focus on, you're a chemical plant, well, you're corporate.
Yeah.
You're everything, okay. But the rest of you are refineries, right? So B1 affects anybody that is a refinery and that has benzene containing waste in their wastewater, okay? So the first step to see where you are is to calculate your tab. Now, tab is basically the sum of all your waste streams. You put a table and you do all your waste streams and then it comes up to a number, right? We're gonna show you how to calculate those. We're gonna do some exercises on that. But it is defined in 61.342 as the sum of the annual benzene quantity of each waste stream at the facility that is greater than 10% water or that will eventually commingle with water. So you can have an organic stream, but then you throw it in the sewer and then it becomes greater than 10% water. So, and you have to count it at the point of generation. So the significance of this is that this is how you define your compliance. The tab number, you will come up with a number for the entire facility. So does anybody here know your tab numbers? 449, 376, so you guys are mayors.
I just finished.
Yeah, the report was due April 7th. Does everybody know why the report is April 7th? Yours is the first. So historically speaking, the rule was promulgated in January 7, 1993. So it was 90 days after that day that you had to do it. Now, if you have a different one, it may be because
They might have, like,
you started later. Well, I don't think so. You'll be waiting. You'll be
I have
waiting.
no idea.
Yeah.
What's the first. Probably someone missed the deadline and, you know, but it, yeah. It's the first.
Okay, excellent. And you are with Martha. Yeah, no, you're over 10 too. So you, yeah. So basically, we're gonna learn how to do the tab. But once you calculate the tab, you have to figure out what tier do you fall in. If your tab is less than 1 megagram of benzene in a year, you only have to, you don't even have to report the tab. It's only when you have process changes. If you're between 1 and 10 megagrams per year of benzene, then you have to report the tab every year. But there's no controls, nothing. You just report this is my tab, etc. If your tab is greater than 10, you have to do all the reporting requirements, and now you have to choose a compliance option, which could be your 6BQ or your 2BQ. Have you guys heard about 6BQ or 2BQ? No, yes. Okay. All right. We're going to talk about all of that, but I just want to give you a general sense, right? What are the steps of implementing a B1 program? Is first you calculate your tab. Once you know what that number is, then you know what tier you fall into. And this for corporate might be good because you may have some chemical plants that are in this tier.
There we go. Sorry. This is a slide of answer. So.
So now we're gonna go into how do you calculate your tab. So tab is you determine the tab at the point of waste generation. This can get a little confusing, but basically is the place where it exits the piece of equipment that is integral to the process. A very typical one of the major waste streams is your desalters. So you use a lot of water in your desalters to clean your crude, to desalt your crude, and then the water comes out, and that's not part of the process. You don't need, that's a waste. You don't need that to continue making gasoline, right? So it's where it exits the piece of equipment that is integral to the process and prior to management or treatment in an operation or equipment that is not integral to the process. So basically what that says, it goes from a process vessel to a waste management unit. So how many of you have your waste management units categorized in your refinery? Okay. You have to have, okay, these are all the things that I'm calling a waste management unit and I'm sending waste to those. So I gotta track it all the way to the first point where it exits the process. Make sense? Any questions? We'll go, so I put here PV to waste management unit, process vessel to waste management unit is where you will see your point of generation, the very, very first steps. Now, if it goes down the line and continues down more waste management units, more waste management units, that's double counting. You want it at the front. And why do you want it at the front? Because it has the highest level of benzene. As you go through waste management units, a tank, a truck, whatever, a sewer, there will be lots of benzene emissions. So your benzene number will continue to reduce and reduce. So that's why they want you to do it at the very front, at the point where it exits the process. This is all prior to handling and treatment of waste before there's any opportunity of benzene loss, just like I mentioned. Since you guys are not TNDS, we're gonna skip that part. Okay, so here's an example, right? Where is the point of generation? You have an overhead receiver coming out of a distillation column, let's just say, and then it has a water loop. And water and oil are going to this wastewater tank. And then the water is going to the wastewater treatment plant and it separates the oil and it goes to the crude tank. And there's also, this is where the actual process goes and goes to another column. So who wants to be the brave volunteer that tells me what is the point of generation? What do you guys think it is? Correct. It's right here. Because this part is integral to the process. And this tank was there, put there just solely to control this water and manage that water downstream. So process vessel to waste management unit. Make sense? So now imagine in a refinery, you can have 2,000 of these streams all over the place, right? And so legal requires a lot of daily vigilance. Like you have to make sure that you're doing your inspections. You have to make sure that you're counting every single stream. That if process changes, like there's an MOC that you're capturing if it somehow affected the stream and the way the stream goes. Okay. So now I want to talk about what's waste under BWON because it's a little bit different than RCRA. And this is where a lot of people get confused. So it's any material that is discarded or is being accumulated, stored, physically, chemically, or biologically treated prior to being discarded, recycled, or discharged. So the example that we saw before makes a lot of sense. It's going to the wastewater treatment plant, you're cleaning the water, right? That makes sense. Some of the things different from RCRA is that recycled materials still count towards your waste. So what does that mean? So let's say you just slopped a product, it's off spec, and you're sending it to a slop tank. The purpose of that tank is to manage that waste rather than to store a brand new product or feed material, right? So that slop tank is considered a waste management unit. That's the big difference between RCRA and BWON, because BWON you seem to be continue to count even though it stays in the loop of the refinery, even though that will eventually be a product. If it is slopped, if it is a recycled material, it counts. Make sense? The only thing that could save you is that, let's say you have a tank, a crude tank, but you also double it up as a slop tank, right? So you have to define, okay, I have waste coming in here, but is this tank primary purpose to feed the unit or to be a slop tank? If you can directly feed the unit, then you will consider that a process vessel. So it will go from process vessel to process vessel, and it doesn't belong in the BWON program. Now, but if that primary purpose of that tank is to slop, if it's an intermediary tank and it does not feed directly into the column, then it is considered a slop tank. So that's why this is here. Wastes are considered to be recycled once they are fed into a process as feedstock or fed to a process tank. That's where the BWON program ends.
So does it end? So if I'm going from my slot tank to a feed vessel, am I B1 up until the point I enter the vessel?
Yes,
Okay, so the piping from the tank to the vessel is still,
yes, that's considered an above ground sewer line, even though it may be
Yeah.
slow, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's where that ended. That's right there.
So I have a question. Us and me end it, or I end it where basically, like our slop goes, one part of it, our light slop goes to the spheres, right? At the spheres, we count it all the way to there, and then it gets dewatered there, but from there it goes directly fed. So I count mine there, like right at the point of water, right? And then from there, it's being fed directly back to, to get reprocessed. So
So your question is the line that is between,
the line between after it's dewatered and the feed, I would consider that it's not, right? Like I would feel like it ends right when it's dewatered.
I think that that's a gray area. Some companies say all the way till it hits that process vessel. Some companies say, that's my last waste management unit.
Right.
And I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer. I've never seen in debate, but I've seen companies do it both ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's kind of like depending on how conservative you are, how much does it cost you to monitor those lines? Because that's a visual inspection quarterly. So, I mean, some refineries are just extremely conservative, and some of them are not. I think you could make the case either way. So remember, the waste that are in form of gas or vapor or fuel gas systems are not regulated by BWON. So this is only any waste that is greater than 10% water. Okay? There's a few exceptions on where you count the point of generation. The vast majority is from where it exits the vessel and it goes into the waste management unit. The first one is the sour water streams. The point of generation is calculated at the exit of the sour water stripper, but with the only covenant that they have to be sour streams, which means greater than 10 ppm sulfur or greater than 10 ppm ammonia. So what does that mean? So you had this example here, but let's say it's sour, right? And instead of sending it to this guy, you put here a sour water stripper, and in the meantime, you're stripping benzene. Well, the agency allows you to count it at the exit. So a lot of the benzene is gone already, right? And they do that because it is a good thing to do, right? To strip it off and then maybe send the H2S to your SRU. So that was one of the things that they allowed in the exemptions. So any streams routed to the sour water system, as long as they're sour, and remember that because there's a lot of people that have gotten big penalties because then they say, well, let's just route everything to a sour water stripper, even if it's not sour, right? So that's the one exemption is you can go down the line at the exit of the sour water stripper and count it there. You just gotta be careful that you have documentation to demonstrate. My most recent consent decree, which was about 6 months ago, that one required you to show, typically before, it was just like, oh, the operator says it's sour. Now they want to know how many ppms of sulfur, how many ppms of ammonia, even if it's, comes from process, they just want to know exactly what it is so they can verify. And, some streams that it's sour, I'm sure it's sour. It has to be sour. It didn't come out sour. So you got to be careful with that.
so they're asking for,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, just like you turn in, like for BWON, when you turn in benzene concentrations, this last consent decree that I did, every single stream that we said we were routing into the sour water system, then they asked for proof.
upstream of the stripper. They wanted to know
Oh, yeah.
upstream of the stripper.
Coming out of the vessel. Coming out of the vessel. Yeah. So you guys are lucky you already have your consent decrees and they haven't dragged you through all the mud of the other ones. You know what a consent decree is? So there's a rule, there's a BWON rule. And then back in the 2000s, there was an enforcement initiative that they said, hey, I don't think these guys are doing the right thing. So the EPA came in and did all these audits, and instead of saying, okay, well, the penalty is $25,000 per penalty per day, and you have 10 drums, so that's 10 penalties, and you had them out for 10 days, so that's 100 penalties, and I'm gonna charge you $2,500 for that. Instead of saying that, they said, why don't we get into an agreement? And they said, okay, well, we're gonna get into agreement, so you have the regular B1 rule, and now we're gonna add enhancement provisions to make sure you're doing the right thing. So, I think you have a consent decree. People forgetting what facility you're from. Yes, yes, yes. Marathon had was one of the first ones.
Okay.
One of the first ones. Or the first batch. The turnaround cycle can be averaged over 5 years, or whatever the turnaround cycle is. So like, let's say you turn around a unit every 4 years. So whatever megagrams of benzene that you get from that turnaround, let's say it's 10 over 4 years, you can report 2.5 for all those 4 years. So they did this so that, you know, small refineries will not just boom, all of a sudden be once in, always in, and now you're in the B1 program. So, the last thing is remediation is excluded from the tab, but not from the compliance option. So remember that. So the first step is just the tab. Where are you on the tab? What are you? Are you less than 1? Are you between 1 and 10? Are you greater than 10? And that's once you know that, then you got to choose a compliance option. All right. So here is how you calculate the tab. Basically, it is the waste quantity in megagrams per year times the concentration of benzene of that specific stream. Now, if that specific stream has oil and water, you have to do the quantity of water times the concentration of benzene in the water plus the quantity of oil times the concentration of oil in that stream. Most streams have a bit of oil, 1%, 50%, something like that. Rarely would you find streams that are just purely one phase water. And then you just have to add them all up and come up with a little table that will tell you what is your total. So, any questions on this? Now, the waste quantity has to be calculated by 61.355, which means you have to give them the highest flow of the last 5 years. So yesterday we turned in a report where we almost went over 10, like 9.69. And why? And when we do the end of line, which is how a check, a mass balance check, we're at 5, saying that it's 9.69. Okay. So why? Because you have to think about the tab calculation, kind of like if you're involving air, like a PTE calculation, a potential to emit, the maximum that you could possibly do. They ask you to do that for the waste quantity, right? Now, concentration just has to be a full weighted average concentration. So they don't require just use the highest one. It has to be the full weighted average, okay? Why do they do that? Because when you take a sample, you can have a spike that day. Somebody dumps something in the sewer and you take a sample and it's a spike. So everybody would be tremendously high. So it's a good idea to get multiple samples, representative samples, and that you can get an average of all of those. So you can determine benzene multiple ways. It doesn't have to be just by sampling, but you do want to sample the main streams, the high flow streams. Hello. So if you want to do it, you can sample and you don't have to do it by the regulation because that's also called process knowledge. But if you are going to take a compliance sample that you're going to submit to the EPA, okay, you want to do it this way. You have to get 3 representative samples. You have to have minimal exposure. You have to test that that is below 10 degrees Celsius or 50 Fahrenheit, right? So that benzene is not volatilizing as you're collecting it, right? Some of these process streams are pretty hot. So And typically we use a sample coil. I'll show you a picture of that. And it has to be done by method. The typical one is 80 to 60. That's the one that most people use, right? And you send it to the lab. These are for compliance samples. They must follow this standard. But the rule allows you to just use knowledge of waste. So if you just want to grab one and run it through your lab, you don't have to collect 3. But we do recommend that you always go chill it because benzene will escape, volatilize. So this is a BWON sampler. It's simply a cooler, as you can see, and it just has a stainless tubing wrapped around. We put a bunch of ice. We make sure we have a fitting that reduces and connects to the process equipment, and then we just wait until it's the right temperature and then cap it real fast and then send it off for analysis. This is an area where if you ever get audited, they want to watch you and see how you do it, right? And typical audit findings are they're not chilling the sample. As I said, they allow you to do notes of waste. You can ask your operations, you can use mass balance data, you can use the original information that you have for the process refinery, records of chemicals purchase, previous test results. They even allow you to use other refinery information if you don't have yours. Okay, so like I said, sampling that doesn't meet those requirements, process modeling, product intermediate specifications, etc. Because you have to think about it. You have over probably 2,000 streams in your tab, right? You can't test every single one of them, but you do want to filter it, see which ones have the highest flow and go test those, because those are the ones that are going to make a big difference. Any questions?
So how often, if you are doing sampling the compliance, like what's kind of the rule of thumb on how old you want that?
So that's another thing that we find in the NEIC audits, the National Enforcement something center, investigation center, National Enforcement Investigation Center. The data is really old. I mean, if you have somebody with 10 years, you may want to refresh it, right? I mean, and if it's process knowledge and they tell you, no, it's still the same. Okay, on this date, on 2022, we talked to process engineers such and such, and they validated this data, right? We'll go, this is more concerning when you're a 2BQ facility and you have to prove that the streams that are less than 10 ppm are truly less than 10 ppm. But we'll go there. I don't want to get ahead, but that's where it really matters. There's also some rules of thumb that they have. So if you can only take a sample of the oil phase and you cannot take a sample of the water phase, a rule of thumb, and this is based on solubility data. I personally run all those numbers at 78 degrees, benzene, water solubility, etc. And the EPA allows this rule of thumb that if you do not have the aqueous benzene concentration, you can use the organic basic benzene concentration and divide it by 100. So let's say, okay, well, the desalter, this is most of the water, but some specific vessel and you got 2000 ppm, okay? That's oil. And they will allow you to divide that by 100 to say, hey, 20 would be your water concentration, and then figure out the percentage. Does that make sense? Now, the other way around.
Like a product tank water here.
Exactly. Exactly. The other way around, if you do not have the oil benzene concentration, because it's like 99% water, 1% oil, and you can extract that layer, you can do it 120, 125 times the aqueous benzene concentration. So you can, they will let you do some of this because we understand that it is a lot of money going towards this program. So they don't want you to sample everything. Now, an important thing, another thing that I see in a lot of tabs, they say, oh, this is water and it's 1800 ppm. Well, the maximum solubility in water, of benzene in water, is 1800. If you think that's water, you're looking at oil at that point. So when we do reviews, when we do audits of the tabs, and we see, okay, they're reporting these numbers and these numbers cannot possibly be still water, right? So just kind of like, for us that are auditors, we know this, and that's just for something for you to keep in mind. Sometimes it's very hard to tell on a vial which one is water, which one is oil, right? Especially with those yellowish products. I think I already said this, that now on the Q side, on the quantity side, highest of the FAFSA years, you can use maximum design capacity. So if you just don't know, we've done a lot of different things, like a bucket test, where you typically take, because a lot of things nowadays are with flow meters, right? So, okay, you just get pi, you get the data, nice and easy. But some of these are manually done. And when I have to set up a BWON program, I follow operators on their routes. I'm like, just take me along. What do you do, right? And I follow their routes. And you will discover a lot of things, a lot of temporary situations, a lot of things that one operator may do and the other one won't do. So you want to do one morning and one evening, right? And bucket test, take a stopwatch, 5-gallon bucket, see how long it takes for that to do that, so you can get a flow rate, gallons per minute. A little redundant already, but here the exemptions, again, remediation is not included in the tab, but it is included in your 2BQ or 6BQ report if you are applicable to those. Turnaround over 5 years. If there's no benzene and have the potential to contain any benzene, you don't have to include it. Streams that are less than 10% water are not included. But remember, if it ever commingles and becomes at some point greater than 10%, you have to include it. And again, the saltwater exemption, it is greater than 10 ppm sulfur or ammonia, you get to count at the exit. So who's ready for some breakout exercises? Yay. I thought that was going to be more of you. That's a good one. We can work together, but given the information that I've given you, you're gonna calculate the task for this refinery. And I'll give you a few minutes, you guys can work together, but let's just kind of see what the streams are, okay? You have the desalter effluent. It is greater than 10% water or mixes with greater than 10% water. Has a flow weighted average benzene concentration of 15 in the water, has a waste quantity of 1,000 milligrams per year. See, I'm so nice, I'm giving to you already the right units. And then the organic portion of that waste.
Not sure how to calculate it. To figure out how to divide by gallons.
It's already megagrams. It's already megagrams. See, that's nice. And then you have the organic portion of that stream. So this stream has some aqueous and some organic. But for example, this stream, the poker wash drum, it is greater than 10% water. It has very low benzene concentration, as we would expect in a poker drum. Good flow, but no organic waste. So this is just water. This is a poker wash water drum. Here with this one, this is a clay filter change out. This has no water. It has a lot of oil. But a lot of oil, but not that type of situation. Okay? So you have a desalter effluent, an alkali tank, water drum, groundwater recovery waste, poker wash drum, jet filter changeouts, and laboratory bottle water. So in addition to that, the facility has had a turnaround in 2005 that generated 15 megagrams of total organic and aqueous staff waste. The refinery utilizes a 5-year turnaround schedule. So, what's the answer?
I wish I had a board. I typically have a board, but
You can work together in groups. You can do it.
Right.
Remember, there's 1,000, a million ppms, right? Okay, we can do the first one together. We can do the first one together to give it, and then you can do the rest, okay? So, desalter effluent water is greater than 10% water, so does it go or not go in my tap? Yes, right? It's greater than 10% water, that's all that what the tap cares. Greater than 10% water, or it will eventually be greater than. So you have to calculate the water plus the organic, right? For that one waste stream to get a number for that stream. So you would take 15 times 11,000, 15 divided by a million times 11,000. And that will give you megagrams per year of benzene, because this is megagrams per year of flow. And this is what makes it just the portion that is just benzene, right? So you would do 15 times 11,000. That should give you 0.165, right? Plus, now we're gonna do the organic waste, which should be 1515 divided by a million parts per million, right? So just a fraction, times 900. That's 1.3635. This portion, 1.3635. Even though it's lower flow has a bigger benzene concentration, right? Because the organic side will always be higher. So you have 1.36 plus 0.165. So this stream is 1.5. Basically, you round it up 1.529 or 0.53. That stream alone, one single stream, gets you like 10% of the 10 milligrams, right? So these stream together, adding the aqueous plus the organic. Did everybody understand how I did it? We're doing an exercise. You guys know how to calculate your path? Or you guys know how to calculate your path? Okay. Maybe use it. Because your exercise right now, doing one now, you can work in person, maybe start with somebody else. But it's already halfway. You may lose the continuity, but it's okay.
Okay.
Absolutely. Before you go, what did you get?
5.7445. Add the turnaround rates, 5-year turnaround schedule.
It's a little high. Yes. So. Want to give it a second try?
What to listen.
Little low. Okay, so let's go stream by stream, right? We did the dissolved water F1, the tab, as long as you're greater than 10% water, you have to calculate the tab by the sum of all your streams that are greater than 10% water, right? So what did we get for an answer? This times this divided by 1,000,000 was 0.165. And this times this divided by 1,000,000, which is in parts per million, was 1.36. So this stream is 1.529, correct? Everybody with me? Okay. The second stream, is it included in the tab? Why? Yes or no? Yes. Yeah. Because it's greater than 10% water, right? And it's for the tab just cares if it's greater than 10% water. You're talking about the 2BQ. Yeah, so right now we're just, the first part of implementing a BWON program is knowing where you are. What is your tab number, right? Because there are 3 thresholds. You're less than 1 megagram of benzene in a year, you're between 1 and 10, or you're greater than 10. If you're greater than 10, you have to implement controls. If you're below 10, you have reporting requirements, but very, very simple, right? So the tab only cares greater than 10% water, I count it. It's a waste, I count it. So the second one, what do you guys get for the second one? Okay, that's right, 0.337. Okay, the third stream, is it included in the top? No, because it's remediation waste. So that's an exclusion of the top. There's basically three things, right? Exclusion of the groundwater or remediation waste. That you can count things at the exit of the sour water strip if they're truly sour, and that you can analyze your turnaround. Okay, so that's 0, because that is not included there. Your coker wash water drum, what did you guys get? That's right. Your filter changeout waste. It's not included. Why is it not included? Less than 10%, and it never come and goes with water. You take those filters outside. You don't put it in the sewer in this situation. So that's a big 0. Your laboratory bottle washer, what did you guys get for that number? 0.045, that's correct. So if you add all those, oh, and then the last thing is we have to add the turnaround waste. So how much is the turnaround waste? 3, right? Because it's 15 megagrams that you're gonna analyze over 5 years. So 3 megagrams, you're gonna count for 3 megagrams each year. So if you add all that up, you get 5 megagrams.
So the turnaround, dividing the turnaround into your turnaround schedule, that's optional,
Uh-huh.
right? So it's probably
If you wanna shoot
more
yourself in the
helpful
foot,
if
yeah.
you're trying to stay under 1 or 10, right?
Yeah, once you're over 10,
Like it
like,
doesn't.
it's simpler to just put the turnaround where it went.
Take the
As
hit
long
when you
as you
take the
controlled
hit,
it,
yeah.
right? As long as you don't want 10 milligrams of waste that you didn't control. You had a question? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's just easier for accounting purposes at that point. I think this is used a lot for small refineries that want to stay below 10 and they don't want you to, now once in, I'm always in, right?
Let me just stick to that thing it is. So I've got nitrogen fertilizer plants that do this exercise annually. You don't have benzene, you use all ammonia. Benzene, they take protection limits of benzene. Have benzene. This exercise.
I
So
wouldn't.
we have non-detect for everything, right?
But they take, yeah, they take.
So they take that. one.
They take the limit because even though it was non-detect.
Concentration?
Yeah, I can't go for.
Sorry, no, but I don't know why are they?
They're a chemical plant, right? So they're a chemical plant. But then the other thing is you have to have benzene in the chemical. A lot of chemical plants are not, they just have a statement saying we are not applicable to B1 because there is no benzene in this facility. Now, if you're an ethylene facility, you will have it, right? But so, yeah, a lot of facilities don't have it. And I'm sure that they're less than 1. They're less than 1 megagram, right?
Oh, yeah.
So there's.
But they go through that exercise every year.
0.015.
It's
No,
stupid.
yeah.
I just have. They're trying to parcel on her.
Yeah,
Picked up by safety.
yeah. You can leave your stuff there if you want.
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would, have a letter of determination saying you have done the determination that after all these years, there's absolutely nothing here. Plus, if you're less than 1, you only have to report if their process changes, major process changes. You added a unit, you did something. Otherwise, you don't have to do anything. If you were above 1, then you have to report every year. But yeah, a nitrogen fertilization plant. It's all right. So now we go back to what we were talking at the beginning. So if you're going to implement a BWON program, we have already talked about assess your facility status, calculate your TAP, right? So now you got a number. So you're 300 and something, she was 400 and something megagrams a year. Do you know yours? You're 7.2? Yeah, you really want to use all this.
Yeah. 2 years ago before I started, it was like 9.
See, and when you get to be like 9, it triggers an audit.
They had
They-
an audit.
yeah.
And they passed it.
Yeah? What is your facility? Where is it at?
Kenai.
You came all the way from Alaska?
Sure did.
You would love Austin. You're like, what is this hot weather? It'll get pretty hot. It'll get like 85 and you'll be like. Okay, well, yeah, so if you're, what, do you just have like a distillation column or a couple of columns?
Refinery.
The whole shabam? Like, but you just have like an atmospheric tower or do you have it like a SRU? Yeah, you have the whole thing? Well, that's impressive. How many barrels? How many barrels a year?
I think we're like max like 72,000 a year.
Yeah, so we did a study and we mapped out all the refineries. You're right at the cuffs. Like it's like 70,000 barrels. You're for sure over 10. It's
Yeah.
like just, I mean, you're right there.
We're the last ones in America that are below.
Nice. Yeah. I will hang on for sure. Because it's a lot of money that you will have to implement in controls. So you want to make sure you do whatever you can to stay, below that safely and environmentally friendly. Okay, so for you, so now we're gonna go into the part is like, all right, determine your compliance level. So again, we have this little drawing again. So you're sitting here in a little bit of the danger zone, I would say, because you can bump up, right? The rest of you are in this bucket, which is greater than 10. So, or maybe you're in this bucket now. You're nitrogen fertilization. But like I said, you don't have to do anything for your nitrogen fertilization plan. You only have to report it every year. And for you, there's a lot of good things that you can do to make sure you're checking compliance. And we'll go through all of those things that you can do. As I was saying, I just reported a facility yesterday that's like 9.69, and they've always been like 7. I'm like, all right, we're gonna have an audit, like just get ready. But once you're over 10, you have to take a compliance, whether you're a 6 BQ facility and a 2 BQ facility. So we'll explain what that means for those of you that don't know what that is, but who's a 6 BQ right here that you already know? Who's a Corpus is 6 BQ. Hopefully it does this. 2 BQ, you're 2 BQ? You're 6 BQ.
Or less is two.
I did your program
Okay.
like 15 years ago.
Or less is-
Huh?
less is-
So what are these? There's another compliance substance that's called the 1 milligram target for process wastewater that is never used. So we're just not even gonna talk about that one. That just hardly ever once. These are the two options. The 2 BQ, which is called segregate and treat. Basically, grab the streams that are high concentration and treat them, and don't worry about the other ones. Segregate and treat. 2 BQ. You have to control everything, but you can leave up to 2 megagrams of benzene on control. Okay? There's a few more things to that caveat. We'll go from there. But basically, you're saying segregate and treat, you have 2 megagrams per year. Treat to target option, you have 6 megagrams per year that you can leave on control. So people are like, duh, why wouldn't I just pick the 6? It's a bigger number. I have more leverage. Well, the answer is they're not calculated the same. So depending on your configuration of your refinery, you may want to do one or the other. I tell you, the one that the EPA loves is this one, the 6 BQ, because they can calculate it. This one, they can't. They can't. I mean, they will try, but you can always say, well, it's somewhere else. So let's go for the 2BQ. So your 2BQ facility is you control all non-accepted waste until it is treated or recycled back into the process, right? Or the big one ends, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, when it goes into a feed tank, right? That's what it is. Or where you treated it. It went through your enhanced biodegradation unit, the bugs, it's been treated, it's been destroyed, right? That's where the BWON program ends. So your uncontrolled waste must be less than 2 megagrams that we talked about, but the less than 10 ppm streams are exempted from control and do not count towards anything. I mean, you're supposed to put them in the tab, right? The tab is everything, just anything that is greater than 10% what it goes in the tab. For the 2BQ, you have to start segregating the streams. The high benzene concentration ones have to be controlled, and you can leave some of those uncontrolled, but up to 2 megagrams a year. And then the less than 10 ppm, you just have to verify every year that it stayed below 10 ppm. That was the question that you had asked earlier, like, where do I get in trouble? How old is my data? Or can I still look the agency with a straight face and say it's still good, right? So that's why it says here, you must demonstrate these exemptions annually. You must say, yeah, I looked at this, these streams are truly, truly low benzene concentration. So, and what I said, uncontrolled waste is counted at the point of generation, just like the tab. Once it exits the process, it goes to a waste management unit. The tab and the 2BQ are calculated the same way. Why did I say that the EPA doesn't like this option? Because you have to imagine it, it's like you have 2 megagrams of uncontrolled stream and they go and check. They take a sample at the end of the line, they go and check and they say, oh, it's 4, you're out of compliance. And you're like, no, I have 1.5 that is uncontrolled and the other one is all these diluted streams that add up, right? They can never prove you wrong. But they're gonna prove you wrong. Because they sample every single stream, right? So the EPA detests this compliance option. They cannot prove you that you're actually violating it. I mean, they could do more upstream concentration and eventually get you, but it is designed for refineries that have a lot of diluted streams or low concentration benzene streams. So it just depends how your refinery is configured. Make sense? You too, right? Uncontrolled turnaround waste must be counted towards the year that it occurred. So you lose the exemption that you can average it. That's only for the top. Remediation waste counts here too. So while you didn't include it in the tab, you have to include it here. Uncontrolled organic waste must be counted towards the 2BQ exempt waste stream total. Does that make sense? Yeah, you have to count it towards your 2BQ layer. If it is a waste and it is organic, you have to count it. Whether or not it can mingle with water, because this is just all waste streams. So the tab and this one are calculated a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
So versus the 6BQ option, which is, this is not allowed. You have to control organic waste. In the 2BQ, they let you just put it in the ledger. Okay, this is something that I'm not controlling a small stream, okay? Okay, so the 6BQ option. So now you either choose the 2 or the 6. 2 megagrams of control, but you have all these diluted waste that don't count towards anything, right? I mean, just the tab, but don't count towards your 2BQ layer. Or you choose the 6BQ option, which is just everything, everything. Greater or less than 10 ppm, they don't care. As long as there's 8 ppm, maybe not the fertilizer facility, but as long as there is an actual ppm of benzene, you have to count it if you don't control it, right? Your tab has control and uncontrol. your 6 in 2BQ is just the uncontrolled portion. Just the uncontrolled portion. So it's a subset. It's the streams that they really want to focus on. What is it that you're not controlling that could affect human health, right? So, but they're calculated different too. The 6BQ, the 2BQ was calculated just like the top at the point of generation where you exit the waste. The 6BQ is calculated at the entrance of the first uncontrolled waste management unit. So if we were to go, I really wish I had a blackboard. So if we were to go to this stream, let's say this was control, right? So the top, you will count the point of generation here. The top doesn't care whether you're control or not, just as long as you're wasting your rate at the percent water, here it goes. Here is where the point of generation is for the top. But let's say that this was control, or that there was another tank here that was control. And you're gonna lose some benzene emissions here, even if it's controlled, right? I mean, your internal flowing will still have emissions, right? So this tank is controlled. Here is where you will count the point of generation for the 6BQ at the entrance of the first uncontrolled waste management unit. This is uncontrolled because it's open to the atmosphere. Does it make sense? So you lost already some benzene here. So you're counting it here. That make sense? So what's the benefit of that? Your calculations will, in theory, will be lower, depending on how far down, how many waste management units you went to be the first uncontrolled waste management unit. So this compliance option is called the target to treat, just enough to be below 6BQ. So the nice thing about that is that the treatment standards and demonstrations do not apply to 6BQ facilities. So you don't have to prove that 98% destruction, et cetera. Because so long as you're below 6, you're just treating to the target of 6 megagrams, okay? Whether the 2BQ, you have to do all the reports and have to, I mean, the 6BQ have reports obviously too, but you don't have, if you didn't achieve that, doesn't mean that you lost control because you're just treating to that number. Does that make sense? That's why it's called the treat to target. Versus the other one is segregate and treat. Segregate the big ones, the 2BQ, and take care of those ones. This one is just treat to get below 6, right? I said it's the issue compliance option to evaluate because once they take a sample at the entrance of your wastewater treatment plant and get the flow, they can say, okay, does it check or not? You can do a mass balance, right? And if it's 5, it's 5. If it's 7, it's 7. There's no, oh, I have the less than 10 ppm somewhere hidden, you know, somewhere there. So, we always talk about the 2-bucket metaphor. Yes, this one has, the 2BQ has 2 buckets. One that is the 2 megagrams of uncontrolled waste, and then you have a humongous bucket that can be as big as you want for the less than 10 ppm. So that's why they're not equal, right? And the 6BQ is just 1 bucket, 6 megagrams. That's it. Like your whole refinery has to be under that. Make sense? It's metaphor. All right. Any questions on where we are?
Yeah, so say we go over and we have to pick which one. And I know that 2 big waste streams that would be best to do the 2BQ method. But I need to evaluate every stream, prove that it's under 10 ppm to start. And then from there, I wouldn't have to.
But you have, annually, you have to say that you review those. Then that you're still sure that it's less than 10 ppm. If you choose a 2,
Gotcha.
the 2BQ option, if they're more stringent on that, did you actually like, you know, verify that that is true?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what I tell all the refineries is once a quarter, just pick a process unit and just review all the waste streams with operations. And then eventually over the next 5-6 years, you'll get it done. The whole thing, right? Just little by little.
Would all the controls have to go?
No, so let's say you're 11, right? You're like, oh, okay. Well, now I got to choose 2 or 6. That's gonna depend on how your refinery is configured. But let's say you go with 6, right? And you have, what do we say, 11. So you have to control minimum 6, 7. You want, because you don't want to be right at the edge, right? In case something happens. So, but we know that the biggest benzene concentration or the biggest waste stream is the desalters. You can segregate that stream and put it to like a benzene stripper, and that's control. And then that counts as 0 towards your 6BQ because now that is a control waste. Does that make sense? So that will be 0. And let's say the desalter is, let's say, what was the example, like 2 megagrams. So you have 11, now you're down to 9. But now, you know, your tab still is going to be always 11 or more, right? So your tab has crossed the 10. So that number is like really nobody cares at some point. Like once you're over 10, you can have 300, you can have 400. You're controlling it. But what they care is the portion that is on control. So, but once you control it, it doesn't belong to that table anymore. Questions? What? You're like, no, are you okay? Okay. All right. So there's like this little table that I put together. Like if it's an uncontrolled waste, if it's less than 10 ppm, it goes in the tab and it goes in the 6BQ, but it doesn't go under the 2BQ, just like we talked about. If it's greater than 10 ppm, it goes in all of them. If it's uncontrolled, it goes in all of them, right? Then if your control is not included in the 2BQ, it is included in the tab. At the 6BQ, you would just count it, that stream, when it became uncontrolled, right? Remember how we said it was controlled at the beginning, went down the line, went to a tank that was controlled, and then boom, it got to a tank that wasn't controlled. You count it there. So that's what this is here. Remediation wastes are not included in the top, and they are included in the other two, so long as in this case it is greater than 10 ppm, right? Because if not, it's less than 10 ppm, nobody cares, right? And this is 2BQ. Less than 10% water streams that they have no contact with water are not included in the tab. This is the organic streams. They must be controlled under the 6BQ. It's a violation if you don't have them controlled. So organic streams have to be controlled under the 6BQ. But under the 2BQ, you just report them if they're greater than 10 ppm. Everything under the 2BQ is if they're greater than 10 ppm, right? If they commingle with water, you have to report, and the turnaround waste, this is the only one that can be average over a turnaround cycle. Can I get you to sign the? Okay. So this is an exercise that we did earlier that learned in the past. The answer is 5. Okay, so far so good.
So 6 set up 6BQ.
Uh-huh.
And when you don't, I guess the included in tab, maybe no, but then it's included in 6BQ, but essentially that means it is included in tab, right? Or they complete.
So
I guess I don't understand what is 6BQ different than the tabs?
yes. So the 6 and 2BQ are uncontrolled waste. The tab is control and uncontrolled. So this number will be really high because you will have everything that you are controlling, and everything that you don't have control. The tab only cares is it's a waste stream. It's greater than 10% water, put it in. Put it in. Now these guys have different things. First of all, they have to be uncontrolled, right? And the 2BQ, basically, there's a portion of those wastes that don't get counted anywhere because they're really low benzene concentration, and so they don't belong there. So 2BQ is uncontrolled greater than 10 ppm. That's what belongs there. 6BQ is uncontrolled, total. That's why it's the favorite compliance option for the EPA, because they can say, did you go or did you not go over that?
I think unclear too much. I have several things that have several lessons.
Remember, but less than separate, if it eventually gets commingled with water, so if you eventually, like, if it's just that organic waste, like oil, but you are dumping it in the sewer, then it counts because it eventually commingles with water.
That's probably where the spill.
Yes, the spills is a typical example. I mean, they're typically, there's a diesel spill, but how do you manage it? Did you grab a vacuum truck and that vacuum truck already had some other waste in there? And let's say, okay, it was oil in the vacuum truck, but then you put it in the slop tank, and the slop tank is a wet slop system, which is greater than 10% water. You're in, right? Or that spill simply just went into the sewer. You're in because it's gonna come and go with water. So, what refinery are you from, or? Oh, okay, good.
Yeah,
Do you know what your tab number is?
I said. I just did it, but yeah. Sorry.
Okay, but you're a 2BQ facility or 6BQ? So you're 6BQ. You're 6BQ. All right, ready for another exercise?
I have a question on that table you just showed, like, available.
Yeah, I think they're gonna post this, but I did bring you a lot of little handouts.
Okay, I like the table.
You'll like the other tables more.
Okay.
So, okay. So this is what's called a layered exercise. So we can start simple and then add and add and add. Okay. So it's one. And I'm gonna give you different, it's gonna be different one. All right, so we're gonna play with some scenarios. Now that we have decided we have a cut, right? We are going to say, okay, I'm gonna give you information about these streams. And you are going to tell me, how would you calculate the time? How would you calculate the 2BQ and how would you calculate the 6BQ? Right? So I just need like A plus B plus C plus D plus what, you know, tab is equal to A plus B plus C plus D, whatever it is. Okay? So write this down. So stream A, should put the drawing up there. Stream A is 10,000 ppm. Okay? Stream B is 55 ppm of benzene, and it is greater than 10% water. Stream C is 7 ppm and is greater than 10% water. Stream B is 30 ppm and is greater than 10% water. Stream E is in uncontrolled groundwater stream. So this is the first uncontrolled groundwater stream. 15 ppm greater than 10% water. 15. So I'll go ahead and tell you, A is, less than 10%. I'm gonna pull it up. I think I'm gonna have to move this up. There's F. There's F. Now, I'll give you F later, but not for this one. So this is gonna be specifically for you. You're coming through that threshold. Oh, wow, I think it's here already. All right, so there's our beautiful drawing. So what I need from you guys is for you to tell me tab is equal to F is equal to, and cubic Q is equal to cubic Q is equal to. Then we'll discuss why.
Sorry. I'm like, yeah, the
Sorry.
picture would be helpful.
I'm gonna take a picture and then I will have to ask you that.
I can email it to you. That's like, I didn't print that one out because do you guys need more time? I'm patient. Should have wrote like something to give prices or something. Okay, what do you guys think is the tab? Do we have answers? I'll take notes. Christy. Oh, this is- B plus C plus D. Anybody has another? So what do you think? Just B plus C. B plus C.
If A, that's eventually will come plus B plus C plus E.
This is for the tab, right?
Yeah.
5. Nobody done it. I'm my teacher. Okay, what do you got? Okay. I'm going back to Work. No, okay,
So
so.
it's ABC.
ABC. So let's talk about it. Why is, where did we put it? Why is A included? If it's 10 ppm, but it's less than 10% water. Eventually it will commingle, right? Eventually you will go through something where all these other streams will make it greater than 10%. So A is correct. B is 55 ppm and greater than 10% water. That's a clean one, right? Nobody really had questions on B. C is 7 ppm and greater than 10% water. The top just cares that you're greater than 10% water commingled. So C goes in. D is 30 ppm and greater than 10% water. So there was one person that included that. The reason why you don't include that is because that's a double count. D should be the sum of this plus this plus this plus whatever lives here. Simple math values, right? So you don't want to double count. The top is at the front, at the point of waste generation. So it's A plus B plus C. D, no. F, even more double counting down the line, right? So no. What about E? Why did we not include E? It's remediation waste. The top says, no, we'll give you a pass on that. You're trying to do something good. So for you, when you're doing that, make sure you don't include that because that's helping you not get to that 10. Okay, so it was a failure. Okay, B, 2BQ, what do you guys think it is? B and D. This is a 2BQ, right?
No, B and E.
B and E is your answer?
But then I should read it. I had a question mark. I had D.
I'm going home before.
I have
Oh. So A is included because it is, like, remember, now 2BQ does not care whether it's greater or less than 10% water. This just case is a waste, right? So the water content, once you get to the 2 and 6, doesn't matter. So A is included because eventually it will come in with water, but it doesn't matter for the uncontrolled portion. It's just, it's a waste and it's not controlled. You're not controlling that waste. It is controlled here, but it becomes uncontrolled. And the 2BQ, you have to come at the point of waste generation. So even though you go through a control status, eventually it becomes uncontrolled, right? You have to follow the entire train. So A is included. B is included. So the answer is A plus B plus E. The answer is because A becomes uncontrolled, B becomes uncontrolled, C becomes uncontrolled, but it's less than 10 ppm. Right? The 2BQ does not include the 10 ppm. So this one is out. This is double count, and E now is included, and E is greater than 10, it's 15. That's what you included. If you were to change this to 9, then it would just be A plus B. So the 2BQ cares. Does it eventually become uncontrolled? So is that clear? So the answer for that is A plus B plus E.
So if A was treated between like D and F or whatever, less than 10,
And
then it would be.
because B1 falls where you recycle it back to the process, like this, if after this it was going to a process tank, boom, that's where it is. Or if you were having here some treatment, treatment, not control, treatment. Or you're destroying it. Or you're having the bugs eat the benzene. Right? Okay. Now, the 6BQ. What do you guys think is the answer for the 6BQ? Before I feel even worse, I'll tell you that the 6BQ is counted at the entrance of the first uncontrolled waste management unit.
So I'll go, I had E and F,
You said E and F?
yeah, but then I had an A question mark because. But I guess that's, at that point, it becomes okay.
You're right. The answer is D and E. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, you said F and E, but F includes these two.
Gotcha.
So it is at the entrance of the first uncontrolled waste management unit. So these two streams are coming from different places. We just do this to confuse you. It could have just been straight here, right? So it is here and here, where it enters the first uncontrolled waste management unit. So how do we feel about this? Okay. Ready to change some stuff? You can type it in that one too if you want to. Just so that we can tell it. Oh, these are tricky. So you added this, instead of just being a tank, you converted that into stripper. And D went from 30 ppm to 2 ppm. So benzene is being stripped out there. So this is to demonstrate how powerful the 6BQ could be. Because you are putting a stripper and really, really lowering that concentration. So your 6BQ number is going to be way less than scenario number 1 in terms of numbers. Okay, are we ready? What do we think the tab is? Don't be afraid. Correct. Still ABC. Nothing changed. I mean, that is another control waste management unit, right? What is the 2BQ? ABE is the same, yeah. Nothing really changed for any of them, right? Because the concentration that moved was this. And the 2BQ is counted at the point of generation. What about 6BQ? That is correct. The number will change dramatically because now these two versus it was 30 before you put a stripper. This is just a tank. It has controls. The strip, and it's a waste management unit. The stripper is still a waste management unit, but it drops significantly that number. Okay. So that seemed like a trick question, right? But that's just to really, it would be a more powerful thing if we had numbers, right? All right. Now this is where it will make a bit more sense now, this one. So I don't know, you guys want more blank ones? Or you want to grab a couple of those? All right. In this scenario, we're back to this is just a tank. This is just a tank, but now this is going to be an EBU, a treatment unit. It's a control tank, a treatment unit. So remember, B1 ends where it is treated or is recycled back into the process. So I think I'm going to stop and we're going to talk about controls. So then we'll take this back up. One, we have talked about controls and we have talked where the program ends. Does anybody want like a 5-minute break? How much? 5-10 minutes? Let's be back here at 10. Inside the roster? Oh, I didn't see this. With the bill with the primary, no. There's the program. How familiar are you with the program? Well, I took over the BWON program last. Fairly new, nice to I feel you have a good understanding. Okay. Yeah, I feel like you're at 60Q, right? Yeah. So we're just going through the exercises, so just kind of to catch you up as we're following kind of this this is where we are, but we're just following, you know, how to implement a B1 program, and we go with first you assess your TAB, your total annual benzene, which you already have established in your program. Then you determine your compliance level. If you're greater than 10 megagrams, then you have to choose a compliance option and implement controls. So you're already over that threshold and you're at 60 Q. So now we're the piece where we're implementing controls. So we'll go about what are the controls for each piece of waste management unit, like each piece of equipment. So I'm sure you know, but I'll say it again, like the TAB is the sum of all waste streams at the point of generation. The 6BQ is the sum of all waste streams at the point where they enter the personal control waste management unit. So that's a big piece for you. So that's so far what we've got into, but it's just been a lot of exercises so that, you know, they get comfortable with that. So, I'm just gonna grab some. A little break, but you know what? We may want to just to catch up, do this exercise.
Oh, okay.
Can you give? I'll give you the parameters, and then you can tell me. You want me to give you the parameters too, so you guys can do it together while the other is here? Yeah. Okay. So what you gotta tell me is how is equal to A plus B plus C plus D plus whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give you the parameters.
Okay.
Where did I put it? You can have mine.
Or you don't know, take that back.
I have my notes left. I don't even want to.
I have another one here.
So, well, you know, what they weight, A is 10,000 ppm.
A is 10,000.
And it's less than 10% water. B is 55 ppm benzene.
Okay.
Greater than 10% water.
Okay.
C is 7 ppm.
Okay.
Greater than 10% water.
Okay.
D is 30 ppm. C is 7 ppm. I'm just using the old one. Greater than 10% water. D is 30 ppm. Greater than 10% water. E is uncontrolled groundwater system. 15 ppm, 1.5. And greater than 10% water. Not yet.
Oh, we're doing this.
Yeah. So you gotta tell me what the TAB, the 2BQ, and the 6BQ are equal to. No, I just wanted to tell me it's A plus B plus C plus D plus F
Oh,
plus
I
D.
see. So you want the tab and then the B2.
6BQ and then 2BQ.
And the vessel in between.
That's a tank, it's a waste management unit. But I gave you information of waste streams. So all of those are waste streams. So for all of us that want to have fun, well, I'll let them do that one first, and then.
Yeah. Well, I think it's supposed to get 60s. So at least that's what, yes, yeah. Please make it might work.
So we just gave them the previous exercise. You're gonna tell us real quickly, but you guys are gonna explain to them why. Since you know the answers, right? When you see Susan Hawkins, tell her hi for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked with her when we did the BWON program.
Okay.
Long time ago. But I enjoy going to Robinson, Illinois. I've never been there before.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful town. It is. All right, Drew, do you know what the tab is equal to? This is the first exercise that we did, so nothing has changed originally. Do you know what the tab is equal to? Almost. Right. So the reason E doesn't enter there is because it's a remediation stream. And remediation is excluded from the tab. It's included in the 6BQ and the 2BQ, but for tab purposes, it's excluded. Very good. All right, so Christy, what is the 2BQ? That might be Christy? Amanda.
The BQ, the uncontrolled, I have, well, the last is going to the tank, that's the atmosphere, so everything's, so it'd be A plus B plus.
So hold on, tell me, are you talking about the 2BQ or the 6BQ?
Oh, I guess it's
So the 6 you're saying it is what?
A plus B plus C.
Somebody want to tell her if that's correct or not? Hey, can we tell her why?
B plus B.
So for the 6BQ is D plus E because A, B, and C are controlled. So is that at the entrance of the first uncontrolled waste management unit?
Oh, I see, okay.
That's the clear distinction.
Okay.
But tell me about the 2BQ. What do you think the 2BQ is?
I have no clue. I'm
So
not-
So the 2BQ is the uncontrolled portion, right? So you were correct. They are uncontrolled, right? So the 2BQ is A plus B plus E. This one is not included,
Because it's less than
BPM.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that, Drew? You're good?
Yeah.
Okay. What if we made, same scenario, just like we talked the original scenario, what if we make E 7 ppm? What would the tab be? The time's the same, right? Because it's an remediation waste is exempted. What would the 2BQ be? A and B. What would the 6BQ be? Still D plus E. Yeah. So we feel good? Better? Okay. Okie dokie. So again, reviewing the steps. Figure out what your tab is. You figure out whether you have to implement controls and choose a compliance option. You pick a compliance option that best fits your needs. If you have low benzene containing streams, I would choose a 2, as long as you can make sure you're below the 2. You have a question?
Question, we did where the first tank was triggered. We are still counting for the 2BQ, A and B. That you didn't count it if it was.
It's not treated, it's just controlled. It's just control. Okay, so now for Stephanie, right? You're the one that's gonna implement the program. Okay, so now, Stephanie's got let's say she goes over 10 in her facility. She's like, okay, I'm gonna choose either 6 or 2, but somehow I gotta control the vast majority of my waste streams, right? Whether she chooses 2 or 6, she's gotta control the vast majority, right? So what is control? For a waste to be considered control, it must be managed in a controlled waste management unit. From the point of waste generation to treatment, recycle, or the point of 6BQ accounting, basically the point where it enters the first uncontrolled waste management unit, okay? So there's only 7 types of waste management units. And so whatever your process goes, it goes into one of those, and that's called a waste, right? From process vessel to waste management unit. And there are the 61.343 to 49. It will tell you, this is how you control this one, this is how you control that one, this is how you control that one, etc. So there are 2 types of control. We got to remember this. Once you go over 10 and you have to control, there's 2 types of control. One is physical control. How are you going to control the tank physically? Are you going to put an internal flooring roof, right? Are you going to connect it to a flare? How physically are you going to grab those emissions and destroy them, right? Or, so those are physical controls. And then you have administrative controls, which is your inspection and monitoring. Those are the 2 controls. For you to truly call something control, you have to have both. Make sense? Every single one of these waste management units has this. So, but you only have to worry about 7 of them. So here they are. You have individual drain systems, and we'll talk about what each one of those are. You have tanks, oily water separators, containers like vacuum trucks or frac tanks, right? Surface impoundments, which nobody ever controls. If you ever find a surface impoundment and you control it, let me see it. Then there's treatment devices, and then closed vent systems. Those are your 7 different types of waste management units. So in order for it to be a waste stream, it has to land in one of these, right? So you are gonna love me for this one, because I did read this one. Okay, here are the 7 types of waste management units. The control standard, examples, and the citations. Okay. So if you look at your little table, not in the same order per se, but tanks, examples are slop tanks, wastewater tanks, spent caustic tanks. Surface impairments are aeration pits, ponds, and lagoons. Containers are, examples are of roll-off boxes, vacuum trucks, drums, totes, flow bins. Individual drain system, it includes all the sewer system, which includes the drains, junction boxes, the sumps, the manholes, the catch basins, the above ground sewer lines that we were talking about earlier, slop lines, etc. Oily water separator, you have your APIs, your CPIs. I think those are pretty easy to spot out. Treatment processes, some strippers, like benzene strippers that are particular for benzene. Enhanced biodegradation unit, incinerators, heaters, boilers. You are destroying benzene. And then the closed vent system and control devices that could be carbon canister flares, all the piping that leads toward it. So now we're going to talk about each one of them. The individual drain systems. Once you decide, okay, I'm going to grab this whole unit and control it, you got to make sure that it is, there's some refineries that have segregated systems, right? Like this part of the refinery is controlled and this part of the refinery is not controlled. Well, you got to make sure that if you're calling that an individual drain system that is controlled, it's controlled all the way. Because if you're a 2BQ and at some point, oh, there's an open junction box, you're out of it since the beginning, right? At the point of generation, the 2BQ is calculated at the point of generation. 6BQ, you can just count it right there at the junction box where it became uncontrolled, right? So, so it includes unburied sewer lines. That's another one that we need to talk about. So I'm going to show you some examples. So once you have your drain system, there's only two options. You either have closed drains or you have P-traps. Okay? Closed drains, everything is closed, everything is sealed. P-traps, you have to have the water seal and do your monthly inspections to see that there's no vapors coming off, that water seal is keeping it tight down there, right? So this is what you see at the refinery, right? But this is what it looks internally, right? So this is a water seal, just like under your sink. Water builds up here, so it prevents emissions from coming up, stuff right here, right? So that's a water seal. That might have been in Whiting where we did this project, where we did inserts.
Yeah, we have the insert.
Yeah. So BP Whiting decided to, okay, we're gonna control everything now. And so they decided, you know, instead of retrofit everything, everywhere, all the pipes, they did these inserts. So the water collects here, builds up the water, and then that's how it prevents emissions. So that's another way that you can do kind of a quick control. Now this is closed drain. Like I said, you either do the first two, which are water seals, whether it's inserted or physically you have the gooseneck, or you do a closed drain system. I mean, it's completely sealed. And they have requirements. Caps and plugs. Everything has to be sealed if you're going to use this option. So as I said, the individual drain system includes the junction boxes. So this is one that it is sealed and has control vent system. It has the carbon canisters right here. So the water comes in here. There is a water seal here. And plus, if there's any emissions coming up here, they will go through the control vent system, which is just a carbon canister. That's why the 2BQ is sometimes a bit dangerous too, because if any point this comes out, then you have to worry about that. So if you decide to use the junction boxes, this is if you do, closed drains and everything is controlled by the carbon canister. If you use water seals, you don't have to have the carbon canister necessarily, but you have to have the flow vent indicator. So you have to have this pipe right here that it is 3 feet long and at least 4 inches. But you have to have a flow indicator that shows when there's flow. So either P traps or everything sealed. And if you use P traps, make sure you have this flow indicators. Make sense? Well, any questions on individual drain systems? Like I say, includes manholes, the whole thing. Last thing you want to say is that your entire system is sealed, and then EPA walks around and, oh, look at this junction box. So be careful, I guess. Any questions on individual drain systems? Do you know what kind of drains do you guys have in your area? If it's water seals, and you do your visual inspections? Okay. This is the less costly option, right? Because imagine how much carbon you will go through if you had to have carbon at all the stations, at every single junction box. So tanks, there's 2 types of tanks that how you can control. If you come here, the tanks, you can either have fixed roof vent to a control device, or you can have an internal floater that follows KB standards, or an external floater that follows KB standards. So that will consider it control. Now, there is one more thing. If you have a very small tank with low vapor pressure, over here in the table, it gives you the parameters, but you can control this with a simple conservation vent on top. So this is typically for like lab tanks that are small enough, right? And then you just put a conservation vent. So you can, there is a way that you can do a fixed roof without tying it to a control device with just a simple conservation vent, but you have to meet, this is a conservation vent, but you have to meet these parameters. It has to be that type, that size, and that vapor pressure. But it's sometimes a quick fix in the blending areas or in the lab areas where you can control it easily. Okay. Any questions on tanks? I mean, tanks are pretty standard. You either KB or not, and you either have a floating roof or you're tied to carbon canisters or a flare, right? If it's fixed. Conservation vents. Oh, we talked about oily water separators. So we've talked about individual drain systems. So there's 7 individual drain systems. 1, tanks 2. Now we're going on all the water separators. The controls of this is very simple. If it is closed, you have to have a closed vent system and control device, right? If you have a floating roof, you have to follow NSPS QQQ standards. And you can have a portion floating and a portion fixed. The fixed portion has to be tied to a control vent system and control device with a carbon canister or flare. And the floating roof portion has to meet QQQ requirements. Examples, API separators, CPI separators, DAF, DNFs, any kind of vessel that is equipped with internal weirs and skims the oil and separates them and puts water on one side and the water on the other side. So remember, if you have a waste stream that goes into an IDS and then it goes into a tank and then it goes into another water separator, you have to follow the whole train to make sure that it is completely controlled. Any questions on all the water separators? Includes the separating unit, the forebay and afterbay, and other separator basins, skimmers, weirs, grid chambers, sludge hoppers, and bar screens located directly after the individual drain system and prior to additional treatment. Very simple though, how to control it, at least in paper. All right, so The fourth waste management unit is containers. These are roll-off boxes, vacuum trucks, dumpsters, chips. That's a good one. I'm sure everybody here has vacuum trucks, right? Everybody here has frac tanks. So, like I said, these are the physical controls. The containment standards, all you have to do is you have to do submerged filling. If you are while you're pumping, you have to do submerged filling. You just have to have a cover, and you have to route it to control vent system and control device if you're doing treatment in those. But if not, it's just having a cover. And if you are filling it, it's submerged fill. There's not really, a lot of people get confused, especially in Texas, but I don't think I have anybody here from Texas. But there are other rules that overlap, like MSS, maintenance, startup, and shutdown, that mandate more for containers. But BWON is simple, just cover it unless you're filling it, right? And do your inspection and monitoring, which will go around those. Now, there's one thing, if it's less than 111 gallons, and it's not required that you control it, it's small enough. Small thing. All right, so then there's these other waste management units, surface impoundments like lagoons. I've never seen one that is controlled, so if you find one, let me know. And the treatment units, that's gonna be, they have to destroy or remove benzene to the standards of those. Oh, then the closed-end systems, if you have any of these, any tank or anything like that that goes to a flare, you have to have it, you have to have the LDAR monitoring and make sure that all the bypass lines, you have to install a flow indicator to record when the stream was routed to a different location, or have a car lock, car seal lock, you know, where you have those ties when you break bypass, and then you have to monitor when was bypass broken, because during those periods it was not controlled, right? Control device standards. They need to meet that they have to reduce emissions by 95% or achieve a total concentration of 20 ppm corrected to 3%. And they have to have a minimum residence times of 0.5 seconds at the minimum temperature of 1400 Fahrenheit if it's a incinerator, boiler, or heater. So once you get into the reporting requirements, you have to report when you deviated from this, right? Vapor recovery systems such as carbon canisters, they have to remove benzene by 98% or VOC by 95%. Flares must comply with 40 CFR 60.18, and the control device has to be, and control vent system must be operated at all times when the waste is managed in such control waste management unit. And this computer is gonna die. Because it was not plugged. So carbon canisters are a little bit more difficult than the regular control systems. You have to have a lot of design documentation for those, and including in there how often you have to change it. There's a what's it called, the design breakthrough frequency. So you have to do those. You have to monitor at less than 20% of the design carbon breakthrough frequency. So those take a little bit more to do the design documentation. So when you set up your BWON program, there is such thing as lifetime equipment things. So for example, your design documentation, you want to make sure that it's in a file for the life of that equipment that shows, okay, how often you gotta change the carbon, what were the parameters when you got it, because when you get audited, they'll ask for those documents, like they'll ask for those, all the tests that you have to do for those type of equipment for design documentation, you want to keep there. So carbon canisters just require a little bit more than the other ones, but so you have to have the basis to show that you are destroying 95% VOC or absorbing 95% VOC or 98% benzene. So, and carbon canisters also, if you guys have a consent decree, you know that that is much more stringent. They will put more requirements around those. Okay. So what are the treatment options? That's what we were talking about. When does BWON end, right? BWON ends when you recycle back the process or you treat it, right? So here it is. You have to remove benzene to a level of less than 10 ppm without dilution. You have to remove 99% or more benzene on a mass basis. You have to use an enhanced biodegradation unit. So this is your bug farm at the wastewater treatment plant. Yeah, or you can do dipple injection or RCRA permitted combustion, etc. But treatment equipment must meet BWON control requirements, except for enhanced biodegradation units. So enhanced biodegradation units, all you have to do is make sure that before you enter your EBU, you're less than 10 ppm benzene. That's the deal. And you have to do monthly sampling, and that is compliance sampling. So you have to follow the rule of the 3 samples, put it in the coil below 50 degrees Fahrenheit and collect those samples. Now, here's a catch. Remember how we talked like the 2BQ is segregate and treat, and the 6BQ is treat to target? So 6BQ compliance option does not require compliance with the treatment standards. So long as you're below 6, it doesn't matter that you didn't get to those parameters. So for example, the EBU has very specific parameters, right? Put the microorganism ratio, etc. So they don't care. As long as you are below 6, you're good. That makes sense? So the reporting is much more stringent on the 2BQ because you gotta say this piece of equipment worked, and it worked according to what we said it was gonna work. When a 6BQ is like, oh, it didn't work. Didn't achieve 95%, it achieved 93, it's okay.
Is that because with 2BQ, you don't add the whatever's left?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So just like I was telling you, the enhanced biodegradation unit is the active sludge process. It's a suspended growth process that generates biomass, uses recycled biomass, and periodically removes biomass from the process. So easier translated, the bugs eat the benzene, right? So allowable treatment process for 2BQ, the inlet is less than 10 ppm. Under the 6BQ, control waste streams enter an EBU are not counted towards the 6BQ if the EBU is less than 10 ppm. So that's where your process ends for the 6BQ. If you control it all the way, and you didn't control it at the EBU, if it is less than 10 ppm, you don't have to count it. That's where they say, okay. These are the typical operating parameters that I was talking about. So, all right, everybody awake? Okay, so we've gone, we assessed the tab, we picked the compliant option, and now we said we're gonna put controls on these pieces of equipment, we're gonna put another stripper, we're gonna do all these things so that we're below 6 or below 2. So now that's where most people are, right? Except for Stephanie, everybody else is on this side already. So really, how do how do you make sure that your B1 program is good, right? Somebody has come and done the tap. It's probably 15 years old. You're hoping that it's still good, right? So you just have to kind of keep an evergreen program, right? So for you guys are big enough, most of you, that you have a particular person that takes care of this program. We're going to talk about tools for tracking compliance, etc. I think that it is very important to, like I said, once a quarter, do a review of one unit. Just see how everything is. Take a couple of samples. Don't break the bank, but look at the bigger streams. See which ones they are. Maybe sample it. Maybe follow an operator during a route. I want to give you guys also the inspection and monitoring requirements, because like I said, there is the physical controls of the tank for the internal floor, but then you also have to do several inspection and monitoring requirements. So let me give you this one. So this is where they will get you, right? How do you guys check compliance at your refineries? How do you check that your 6BQ is the 5 that you're reporting? Do you? Oh, how do you know that your 1.2 is 1.2?
A lot of data collection.
You all have the end-of-line program, right? Most of you do, right? So that's a check. So what do the EPA look at? They come in and they say, okay, Christy? Gosh, I have terrible. Shelly's saying, oh, I have 1.2. Okay, so they're gonna try to, the first thing that they're gonna do is they're gonna go collect samples at the end of the line and see if it's okay. If this number is showing 1 and she's reporting 1.2, I don't have a problem, right? But if this is showing me 5 and she's reporting 1.2, and she said, well, I'm at 2BQ, you know, I mean, it could be all these diluted streams, but that's a big differential, right? That's when you start having problems, when they come in, take a sample, and the number is higher than what you're reporting. We know they're never going to match. It's not an exact science. You're going to lose benzene. They say you will lose 20% of benzene just as it goes through the process, right? And some refineries calculate for that 20%. They divide it by 0.8 and say this is what our number should be. It's not a standard method, but that's how a lot of refineries defend themselves, right? So, but that's the first things they will do. They'll come in and they'll grab a sample. They'll grab a sample of your water and a sample of your slop oil and do a quick back of the envelope mass balance and say, are they in par or are they not? Do we need to go deeper? Do we need to investigate? So, any of you been in an audit process with the NAIC or no? Okay. So that's what they would do. So you have to have all your tools to track compliance. I want to go real quickly through the inspection and monitoring requirements right here. For the tanks, you have to do initial and quarterly visual inspection, and you have to do initially and annually the non-detectable emissions, which is the LDAR. Everybody knows what method 21 is, right? For the internal floating roof tank, you basically have to follow KB, where you have to empty and the gas every 5 years. Surface impoundments is a visual inspection initially and quarterly, and also method 21 initially and quarterly. Containers, again, visual inspection initially and quarterly, and annual LDAR and initially and annually thereafter. Closed drain systems, they have to have the visual inspection initially and quarterly, and the annual NDE. For water seals, you have to, this is not here, but you have to do the quarterly, oh no, it is the quarterly visual inspections of the water. Some consent decrees may require you to do monthly, right? That's what I was getting like confused with now. But you don't have to do method 21 around the water seals. The unburied sewer lines, that's something that we talked about earlier. You have to do initially and quarterly visual inspections, but no method 21. For all the water separators that are fixed roof tanks, you have to do initial and quarter visually and initial and annual non-detectable. For the floating roof ones, the floating roof all the water separators, you have to have you follow NSPS QQQ, which is primary seal gap measurements initially and every 5 years. Treatment processes, you have to do initial and quarterly visuals, and the ones that are less than atmospheric pressure, the ones that are in vacuum, in addition to doing the visual, you also have to do the non-detectable. And closed systems, you have to do initial and quarter visual and initial and annual non-detectable. So a lot of people use their elder databases to track this kind of compliance. There's one thing, when you do an audit or when you're looking at a program management, the first thing is, obviously you ask for data, you try to understand the process, but then you go do a field walkthrough and then you review records. So records are very important because they're the face to the auditors, right? And a lot of people use the elder databases to comply with this information. It's a big implementation if you do it the first time, but after that, it's pretty good. Any questions on this, on the inspection and monitoring requirements? Mostly elder, mostly quarterly visuals, except for tanks and all the water separators.
Have you heard any, has there been any movement on like, other than visual inspections, you know, especially for like water seals and drink cups? Sensor or camera technology being approved other than, yep.
Not approved, and I don't even know what technologies would be. What have you heard? Like, do you know of a technology?
Oh, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, no, I don't know how you would.
I tried to look at one. Estimates. Startups. We tried a couple of.
So, do you think it's because it's hard to document, or is it because it's what? So, is it?
Yeah, just, industry in general is trying to get away from like, how can we transform and how can we automate tasks that operators are doing,
Right.
that people are doing? How can you get a little bit away from it being person dependent,
Right.
or being more of a real-time indication other than like, if that drain cup is dry, I'm gonna know right away, instead of it going, potentially being dry for 28 days in between inspections, you know?
Right.
So
Right.
all sorts of, you know, reasons
To want to do that
to
way. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, I haven't heard anything. I mean, a lot of people are going away from, manual logs, because that's really hard to get them together, and they just have like the elder databases where they record when they do the inspections, etc. But I don't know. What do you guys use? Do you just have the operators? Where do you record it?
Database.
Okay. Yeah. So the B1 program management, once you're over 10, really is all about making sure that your BQ is below your levels, right? And you want to have a comfortable cushion. You don't want to be at 1.9 or 5.6, something like that. So it's important to do document control, work practice assessments, and data management. The big focus areas that we go on is control standards, making sure that you have a waste management unit list, that you know what type of waste management that is, that you know what type of control you're going to do for that one, that you know what inspections you have to do, what do you have to monitor, right? And then what you have to report. Those are really the focus areas. And you know, always look at your tab report, more focused on your compliance option, and then your end of line program. If you have a consent decree, it's typically mandated. And for you, Stephanie, you want to do a end of line trial. Like you want to, we'll talk about how you do that, but basically you just do an end of line program on your facility without reporting it, right? So you know the health of your program. So document control, conduct a document a line by line review of the regulation and the consent decree requirements if you have, right? Prepare a waste management list and categorize it by control. Track inspection, monitoring, and record keeping requirements for each waste management unit. So you want to make sure you have, and like we typically also have like the retention, how long you have to retain that. So there's some things that are for the life of the equipment, right? Like control engineering design standards. You want to make sure that they're saved somewhere and that you're ready when they ask for them and that they're still valid, right? Did I just say that? Okay. Compile reporting and record keeping documents in a readily available place. Document management of self-reviews and how it was applicable to BWON and how it changed your tab, if it did or not, or your TBQ. I said this is so important because it's the primary way that you communicate to the EPA, and just make sure you have it all in one place. So what are the record keeping requirements? For your tab and your uncontrolled benzene quantity, believe it or not, this is so petty, but they will give you a citation and a finding for not having one of these things. So for example, you have to have, the benzene concentration has to be the minimum, maximum, and average. And if you just present the flow weighted average, they'll cite you because you don't have the minimum and the max. So these are petty things, right? They're not big things, but you have to identify the stream and the control status at the point of generation, whether it's control or not, for the tap. And for the 6BQ, you have to document that it was basically controlled all the way until it became uncontrolled, right? Your inspections and monitoring records, like I said, elder databases, I like them the best. And you have to have every time that there was something that failed a visual inspection, okay? And then you have to put, so if you guys remember, there is an exception report. So when you turn in your tab report, all of us have just recently turned it in, right? So you turn in your cover letter, you turn in your tab, then you turn in your 2 or 6BQ, and then there's a last report. The last report is called the exception report. And in that report, you have to turn in this failed, that failed, and this was the corrective action. Doesn't mean that you lost control, right? Unless it's for a very, very long period of time. But anything that you have to have the description of the corrective actions and the date of the repair for each piece that failed. Now, that is only if you're over 10. If you're under 10, you don't have to report anything. So, and you must certify that on your quarterly report that all method 21 was done, right? So that fell in that quarter. So for control device record, you have to, this is for your carbon canisters, your flares, you have to have engineering calculations or performance tests. And you have to have drawing, schematic, piping and instrumentation diagram. Just keep it in the lifetime folder for those pieces of equipment. The carbon canister is a little bit more difficult. You have to have the concentration, the humidity, the temperature, the design carbon replacement interval. So I know I did this for Robinson. So hopefully you guys still have that information. For control devices, you have to report the days of startup, the days of shutdown, the description of the operating parameters. Like if you're saying, okay, at 1400 F is working, below 1400 F is not working, you have to report when it didn't work. Anything that deviates from the normal operating conditions, anytime that there was bypasses. When you bypass control, that's important. Reporting requirements, you have to do the annual BWON report, like I said, that has 3 reports, right? The tab, the 6BQ or 2BQ, and then your exception report, what went wrong on your monitoring. This includes this tank failed, we had to take this tank out of service. This, the water still wasn't there, this hatch on top of a cover failed, etc. And how we did it, we fixed it. We did a first attempt, then we did a second attempt, and then it was fixed on such date. That's just a little table. All of you included it, right? Okay. So you have the annual report, typically on April 7th, as we said, it's because the regulation was promulgated on January 7th, 90 days after that, you had to submit it. The quarterly report is 30 days after the end of the calendar quarter. You have to have all your inspection and certify that you did all your inspection and monitoring. Report periods where it was out of range, like third-party outages, the EBU did not have the less than 10, so you lost control there, etc. Report seal gap measurements on floating roofs that were out of range. Just all the same things that you do for KB, basically. Something fails, just report it during the quarterly report. You did the inspections, and these are the things that fail, right? You look worried. Don't be worried. So those are basically all the reports that you have. Quarterly and your annual report. So unless you have consent decrees, and those vary, but those are typically semi-annually that you have to report. And there's a little bit more stringent citations, but not by much. I mean, so just giving you guys now, I want to give you a couple of tools. So for your programs. For waste stream identification, what we do is we highlight the PNIDs and where it first exits the process and then follow it all the way through. Same thing with waste management units. You want to highlight all the waste management units on your PNIDs and see what the control is. Keep that documentation. Robinson has it. We should have it, yeah. So that's very important, especially for you, Stephanie. It's important that you say, okay, started here, it trickled down here, this is where it lost control, right? So piping and instrumentation diagrams are really, really good. Make sure you document everything very well. So when we do a program, we have what's called a BWON doc, the documentation and compliance tool. It's a simple spreadsheet. Well, no, it's a complex spreadsheet, but it's a complex spreadsheet, but it still is a spreadsheet, right? But you document everything, right? You have every single waste stream and how you arrive to those conclusions that here's the waste, and this is how we arrived at the waste. We got it from such and such mass balance, or we did a stopwatch, or we talk to operations, or we follow around. This is what we believe is the waste quantity, right? And this is the highest it has been for the last 5 years. But just keep all the information in one set place, like your waste management unit list. I mean, it has to be there. What type of waste management it is, and what are you doing, and where are you recording the information, right? For keep all the process design documentation that you have. Do field walkthroughs and observation of the operator rounds, and make sure you review your MOC program at least once a year, right? If not, as they come in. I don't know how you guys are structured. These are the things that are required for waste stream documentation. You have to have waste stream identification, just saying desalter water effluent, right? Control status, yes or no. Water content, waste stream type, the waste quantity, the range of benzene concentrations, the flow weighted average benzene concentration, and finally the result. How many megagrams of benzene do you have? Just document everything, waste quantity. We've talked about all of this. Even anecdotal evidence, such operator Juan Perez on August 2015 stated that this is like he opens up this valve once a shift. The estimated worst case volume was this, etc. So you know you can track it out, right? Field observations are good too, bucket tests. So here's an example. According to crew unit engineers, the design water wash rate is 5% of the design unit charge, which is 180,000 barrels per day. Therefore, the annual waste quantity for the water phase is this. So 180,000 barrels, 5% of that, then just convert from gallons to megagrams, right? And that's how you got the waste quantity. So remember always, like, this is an example of the desalter, but as you know, the desalter is not just clean water. So make sure that you also, this is just what the engineer is telling you. This is the water charge rate, but not all of it is water. There is an oil portion of the waste. So you can document the oil phase by using like a graduated cylinder, right? That's what we do when we take samples. We grab 100 milliliter graduated cylinder. We just take the sample as we normally would, let it sit, and then we can tell what percentage is oil versus what percentage is water. And then you can test it. You can extract that layer, or the water and the oil, or you can estimate it based on the rules of thumb that I told you earlier, like divided by 100 or multiplied times 125, depending on which benzene concentration you have. And again, you can get oil concentration data from modeling, from MSDS, from sampling itself, the water concentration. Two, you can use a rule of thumb. I think I said all of this. Okay, so far, any questions? The original scenario. Go back to the little drawing. So A is 10,000 ppm, less than 10% water. B is 55 ppm, greater than 10% water. C is 7 ppm, greater than 10% water. D is going to be 15 ppm, greater than 10% water. E is going to be 15 ppm, greater than 10% water. And F is going to be 12 ppm. Now, you're going to leave this one as if it was a controlled waste management unit tank, but you're gonna make this one an enhanced biodegradation unit. So we're back to the schematic. Mark. And A is 10,000. Do you need a new one?
same.
Mhm. Except for D, it's 15, that's what I said, right? And F is 12. Now I'm giving you a little bit more information. But F, before you get into their EBU, is 12. 12 ppm. The first waste management unit is control, and the second one is an EBU. Okay, what's the tab? Same. The tab? Who cares? I don't care what's control and control. I'm just greater than 10% water and I'm good, right? So it's the same. Nothing changes from the top. That number is just that's like your potential to emit is the number that is gonna make you decide whether you're gonna control or not. Once you're over 10, now this is where we focus. What is your 2BQ? Nothing. Why? So she says nothing, 0. Any other takers? So this is all control because this is an EBU, but right here is 12 ppm. The rule says in order for you to say this is treatment, I don't have to control this guy. You have to come in at 10 or less for you to do it. Otherwise, you gotta count it. So the EBU, you're not controlling it. It's open to the atmosphere. It's open tank, right? It's an aeration basin, right? It's open. There's no way to control that one. So, but all they're asking you to is make this less than 10. If you don't make this less than 10, then that's as if this was an uncontrolled waste management unit. So your 2BQ is the same as it was before, which is, what is it? A plus B plus E. We don't include C because it's less than 10 ppm, right? So it's A plus B plus C because that EBU did not meet the requirement that it asked you to do. So Drew was asking me earlier, what did you ask about the EBU? Like if it's
Just where exactly like you're supposed to.
sampling, yeah, it's just at the inlet right here
So it's like the inlet.
of the EBU. The inlet of the enhanced degradation unit. So not at the wastewater treatment plant.
Not like sampling from the aeration basin, the stream that's directly going.
Yes. So, but yeah, so the reason you take that monthly sample is so you can, what I was telling Drew was that I had a client that was like a 13 or something for a small period of time, like 20 days, I want to say. So we said during those 20 days, the entire refinery was on control, but then we came back, right? Okay, what is the 6BQ? If your EBU is not meeting that standard, this just becomes an uncontrolled waste management unit. So it's the same scenario that you had before, which is D, because the 6BQ is you count it at the entrance of the first uncontrolled waste management unit. Because this is control, whoops, I became uncontrolled here. because the pipeline that goes here, the emissions are gonna go out this way, right? So right here is where I lost it. D plus E, same thing. Now, let's say the exact same scenario, but now make D 4 ppm and F 7 ppm. Four and F7. So before this one was 15 and it was a big enough hole that this only go to 12. Now this one is 4. When it commingles with this guy, which is 15, this one becomes 7 based on the flows. So now you are meeting the enhanced biodegradation unit standards. You can call that the end of it all. Like that's where the BWON program ends. Because your EBU is working. Or you're meeting the standards, not that it's not working. So you're meeting the inlet standards towards of it. You know, managing your waste to where it's just. Huh?
For 2BQ. Just
Yeah, correct. So your 2BQ is just E. All of these guys, they always kept control until they got to their treatment. Boom, they're gone, they don't exist. Now, what's your tab? Same thing, A plus B plus C, right? I mean, did I say that? Yeah, A plus B plus C. Yeah, the tab doesn't change, right? But for the 6BQ, 6BQ is only on control. 2BQ is only on control. All of this kept going. This guy was upstream was on control, so it's the one guy that gets in. Does that make sense? So you can see where the BWON program ends. It's not where you control it, it's where you treat it. Or you recycle it back to a feed tank, right?
isn't like necessarily stated anywhere.
So I have, yeah, it's just as long as the inlet concentration. Well, you have to meet the food to microorganism ratio, you know, there's the ABU standards that you gotta meet. Well, and actually, that's not even true because the 6BQ is a treat to target, so yeah. But you know, one of the things that I have one of my clients do, because he does have a lot of problems, and I think he's are even upstream to that, is he sends the water offsite to be treated offsite when he gets in that pickle. And he makes sure that the person that he sent it to, that they're controlling it. So it's just a sister facility. One of them is a sister facility, and then he has another option. He sends them to Western Gulf, and they process it. But that's here in Texas. I don't know what you guys have over there. You know, they just ships it and make sure that it is controlled all the way. But yeah, he gets into a lot of those kind of problems where you just can't control that inlet. And rather than lose control, he sends it offsite so for somebody else to control it. So clear as mud? No, okay, so now you guys know how to calculate your tab. Who feels comfortable about that? Good. Your 6BQ and 2BQ? Okay. No, choosing a compliance option is really more what you can do. Like, what are your numbers? You know, what can you reduce? It's more about what you can control. But at the end of this whole cycle, right, we went from calculating the tab, determining our compliance option if we're over that. Hold on a second. So we're kind of like in the last step of your BWON program. Once you have created tools for track your other databases, you're managing inspection and and monitoring requirements, you're doing document control, et cetera, and really is doing your own audits internally so that before somebody catches you, you already have fixed the problem, right? I think that the danger zone is when there's new B1 staff, changes in ownership, or changes in feedstock. That happened to us in Texas when we hit the Eagle Ford crude, just an hour south of here. They have all those crudes that are really light crude. And so most of our refineries here in Texas are directed towards heavy sour crudes. And this came out as a light crude. So we had to, the columns had to be retrofitted and all kinds of stuff. And it changed a lot, the benzene concentration, right? And made some facilities go over. So, just don't leave your number static to your questions. So how old is old data, right? I say over 10 years is old, one. But certainly it could be old if you change crude stock, right? So I don't know if you guys now are using more different kinds of crude with what's going on right now in the world. So watch out for that. Do test it. I always test every year my desalters and my crudes, just so I know where am I, right? Because that's the beginning of everything, and that's going to change everything going downstream. So that's very important. So I just kind of want to walk you through what a formal audit would be, so you are prepared. So first of all, they'll give you like a pre-audit data request. They'll send it to you. You have 3 weeks, typically 2 to 3 weeks to respond. And they want to have 50% or so of the data in hand before they go over there. They will do an on-site data review, and then they will do a field verification and sampling. So word of advice, if you get audited, first of all, do it this internal, right? Start your end-of-line program. We'll talk about that. But if you have a regulator come and audit your facility, make sure you are standing behind them. And if they take a sample, you take a sample, right? And you send it to the lab. Because that's the first things that they would do. Let me show you. So this is a typical refinery, right? So the end-of-line program is basically somewhere down the line where they can do a mass balance. They know it's not exact, but as I said, if the number is higher than what you're reporting, we have a problem. If the number is lower, it's fine. So this is the refinery oil, water, sewer, goes into an API separator, separates the oil, goes back to a crude feed tank. The water goes to get treated in an enhanced biodegradation unit, and you have a segregated system here for storm water. And it goes there too, and you have solids here coming out. So they want to do a mass balance of your entire refinery. Very difficult to do, especially with just one sample, but this is what they're going to go against. The regulator is going to come in and grab a sample, and they will do a mass balance. So this is what they would do. They will do it around typically your oily water separator. And they'll take these samples. They'll take the oil portions, they'll take the water portions, and they'll take the solid portions. And if you have flow meters and all of this, they will take them. If not, they'll ask you for tank changes, especially in this area, right? And they will do a mass balance. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 should equal your benzene concentration, right? So they'll take the flow and then take a sample. Okay? And then they'll say, obviously they're not going to be the same, but that's what they will do. So the focus that they do is they look typically at the 6BQ or 2BQ and end the line. They will they'll make sure that you have documented correctly your waste management units. and that you are doing the inspection and monitoring. They will do dual phase sampling of all end-of-line points, water and oil. They will do a comparison and they will review your consent decree or your the rule requirements one by one. That's really where the focus is. They tend to focus a lot on the carbon canisters. They tend to focus a lot on integrity issues. So they will also bring an IR camera. And to your question, Amanda, I was thinking, huh? Did I get the wrong one? Amanda, that's Amanda. I cannot get it. Put on time speaker.
It's all right.
All right, Shelly, right? Dang it, did I get it wrong? Christy. No, you're Shelly.
Yeah.
But I started thinking about it. You know what the technology that you were asking about? I think that the only thing is the IR camera, but that's for more. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could put an alternative standard instead of doing the visual inspections on the water seals, the quarterly, or if you have a consent decree, the monthly. I think that you can use that. The IR camera just looks at emissions. I don't know if the range is good enough, but I do know that when they come for those audits, they bring an IR camera and they will look for any kind of leaks, like on top of, they go to all the major places, they'll go to your main sewer and then inspect if you have carbon canisters, that there's no emissions coming out of that, if that's the option that you chose. So I was thinking about that, and then when I saw that. So this is typically the data that they request. They will ask you for your end-of-line plan as well as the schematic. If you have a consent decree, you'll have that. Kind of like the picture that I just showed you where the points would be. That will be the schematic that they will be asking for. Then they'll ask if there was any kind of corrective action plan and schedule under the consent decree. If you have a consent decree, they make you do a review and verification. Like you have to hire a third party. They come in, they do a review, and they say, these are the things that I found wrong. Let's put a corrective action for those. So they'll ask you for that. They'll see if you did them or not, right? They'll ask you for a list of tanks. They will ask you for all the monitoring parameters around any control, like a benzene stripper. Ask you for your carbon canisters information, visual inspections, any standard operating procedure. They'll if you have a waste management unit list, that's great because they can go just one by one. And then they'll just search all your documentation. But while they're on site, this typically lasts like 3 days to a week, an audit like this. Right? Has anybody been audited? Yeah. And it'll last like a week, 3 days a week, and they'll take samples, they'll go with the IR camera, and they'll look at all of this. So be ready. They will conduct field walkthroughs. So, that's why I say you do the same, but you get ahead of the curve. They focus a lot of on car seals on bypasses too. They look, okay, where are all your bypasses? When did you lose control? Why did you lose control? What do you do about it? Did you report it correctly? Like I said, I would use the floor camera to verify all that there's no leaks, etc. They will, but that's pretty much it around the inspections. They will analyze historical trends of your tab versus the VQ, right? How is it going up? Is it going down? How they will look at the end of line, compare it to that. They will review the, to see if your historical bases are recent or somewhat recent. They focus a lot in the ones that are 2BQ, the less than 10, that you have verified that data annually, because that is a requirement to be verified annually. And they'll get really, really deep into your underlying program. What are your bases? How are you coming up with the numbers? Where are you collecting them? I had the unfortunate event that during an audit, they discovered that my client at the time was sampling in the wrong location. That did not go well. But yeah, so they'll want to go physically show me where you're getting that, you know. For whatever reason, they always want to watch somebody sampling. So they'll make sure that they know that they know exactly how to do it, that they can do dual phase, that the temperature is right. They focus a lot on that. I guess some of the lessons learned that we have is to know your regulations and the requirements for each piece of waste management unit. Map out your compliance strategy on your schematic. Most of you do have a schematic that shows, you know, this is how the refinery works, this is the slop, this is the water, this is how it is. Make sure that you know which ones are controlled, which ones are not on control, and identify all your major waste streams like we talked about and sampling them. Audit your samplers. They also check your audit records, make sure that you train them on the right basis. Like again, nothing is applicable to you until you go over the 10, but be familiar with the inspection list and component locations and know where your junction boxes are. Yeah, here's a question. Pervasive use of all data making is a question that Shelley had. I got it right, Shelley? The typical audit deficiencies. Here's some of the things that we have not talked about. Waste shipped off-site notices to receiving facilities. You have to let them know that that's a BWON waste. And that you want it control or on control, right? So typically if you're sending a notification, it's because you want to control.
You don't have to send them.
Yeah, no, this is just what you want them to do. Another big area is the sour water system. So remember how we talked about that if a stream is sour, you can count it at the exit of the stripper. One of the big issues is that system is enclosed. And most people treat them as control. So they follow the control standards. So there's been a couple of ADIs of what that really means. And safe bet, keep it all control. Like if you have a tank right before the sour water stripper, the manager has to control that tank, even though it's a water tank, you know. So just keep the same level of control as if they were a BWON tank. They always find a lot of bad stuff around frac tanks and vacuum trucks, like we talked about. The enhanced biodegradation unit demonstration, the 10 ppm, they have to make sure that it's taken correctly. Any kind of inspections that are missing around the tanks, any kind of carbon canister break monitor, missing documentation is another one that is big. But yeah, that's it. Are there any questions on the whole thing? I think we went through all the phases. You calculate your time, you pick your compliance option, you install controls, you install systems to track compliance, you give roles and responsibilities for, like Citgo has in Lamont, from the process engineer to the operator to everybody, you involve the whole entire everybody in the process. Always makes it very successful. And then you audit yourself before you get audited. And if you don't have an underlying program, especially for you, Stephanie, I would start one. Just start sampling, see where you land. If you're at 7 or 8, worried. Okay, any questions, anything else? I think this is we have 15 more minutes, so I'm all ears, whatever you guys want.
I missed it at the beginning, but I was wondering about